Kotsky dropped his duffel bag to the floor and surveyed his room with a dismal resignation. His new home away from home, for the next week anyway. It wasn't much to look at. A moderately sized bed that was big enough for 2 people, but hardly extravagant. A small wardrobe where he could store his clothes. A connected bathroom and shower that, at least at first glance, seemed nice, if not especially spacious. The carpet was a soft beige, the bedding was done in a cream and burgundy, and the curtains matched the bedspread. Not exactly classy, but it felt almost homey. He could probably endure a week in here, Kotsky decided, and proceeded to dump out the contents of his duffel bag. His first order of business would be stashing suppressants. He knew it would have to be creative. The cleaning staff was probably trained to find them in the room, but he figured that if he kept them in an inner pocket of a jacket or something, they might make it through inspection. He'd also keep a few on his person, just to be sure he had enough to last him if all the pills in his room went missing. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and Kotsky fished it out, glancing down to see who was bothering him in the middle of the day. Smiling to himself, he opened the message from Kirishima. "It's so boring on patrol without you here to bother." Rolling his eyes at his friend's antics, Kotsky composed a scathing response. "And yet, you still found a way to be a fucking nuisance." It took only a few moments for Kirishima to start typing a response. "Don't be like that." Before Kotsky had the chance to respond, another text came in. "How's the paperwork going?" Rolling his eyes at the redhead's penchant for double texting, he decided to ignore the first message and just reply to the second. "Don't remind me." Kirishima answered quickly, once more using 2 texts where one would suffice. "Haha, are you avoiding it already? You need to submit it soon though, don't you?" Smirking, Kotsky shot up another smart remark. "Yes, Mom." With that, Kotsky shoved his phone back into his pocket, patted himself down to make sure he had all of his pills, and sighed. Glancing down at his laminated schedule, Kotsky saw that he was currently scheduled for socialization. Blondie had explained to him that the staff would be keeping track of his participation since he was a mandatory resident. If he didn't fulfill his duties during this visit, he would be subjected to a second mandatory residence the following year, and every year after that, until he complied with the requirements set forth as part of the mandatory residency. So he was going to do his best to complete all the required activities on his schedule. Fortunately, the government couldn't specifically require mating to complete his mandatory residency. However, he noted that he had a fucking ton of socialization in his schedule, as well as time blocked off for reserved visitations, whatever the hell that was. Scowling, Kotsky kicked open his door, only to realize he had no idea where the fuck he was supposed to go for his socialization time. He glanced around, catching sight of a young woman with light brown hair cascading in waves down her back and about her shoulders. She was wearing a pastel pink sundress with little blue flowers along the hem and sleeves. "Hey, you!" Kotsky called, walking towards her. She turned to look at him and gave a sharp eep, before looking around like she was trying to spot an escape route. Her hesitation was her undoing, and Kotsky caught up to her easily. "Hey," he said by way of greeting. "Where the fuck do I go for socialization?" The woman stared blankly at him, eyes wide. "You're an Omega?" She finally managed, a look of shock on her face. "Fuck off with that. Male Omegas account for almost half of the Omega population." Kotsky snapped, though admittedly calling 35% almost half was a bit of a stretch. "That's not what I meant," the girl explained weakly. "There are lots of male Omegas around here, but you don't look like an Omega," she explained weakly. "You know, with the, muscles. Not many alphas are into megas who could snap them into 2. She added, almost rotely, as if she'd heard it most of her life. Which, considering she was here too, she probably had heard that sort of shit most of her adult life. "Fuck that bullshit," Kotsky declared. "If an alpha's weak enough to be intimidated by some fucking muscles, they weren't much of an alpha to begin with." He scowled. They were getting off track. "Now, socialization?" The young woman was giving Bakugou a strange look as she answered. I was just heading that way. You can walk with me. Katsuki shrugged. Great, so get moving. With an irritated look, she turned and glided down the hall, all lithe and grace and allure. She might have been intentionally swaying her hips, or it might be her natural gait. Either way, it did nothing for Bakugou. He wasn't surprised by this, since he wasn't into women any more than he was into most alphas. Still, he wondered if her swaying hips were natural or an affectation. Fuck, he hoped his own hips didn't sway like that when he walked. He didn't let his musings distract him, determined to learn his way around. They passed a room with a few low tables, some comfortable seats and chaise lounges scattered around. There were a few scattered couples sitting close to each other, sipping drinks or just talking softly. Katsuki grabbed the girl's arm, pointing. What's that room? The parlor, she answered, tugging her arm out of his grip. He let his fingers relax so she wouldn't hurt herself trying to pull away. It's where someone can have a more quiet, private visit with an individual resident. If an alpha puts in a request for a reserved visitation, you could go there instead of your own room if you're not ready for... She shrugged uncomfortably. Not ready to fuck? Katsuki supplied, enjoying the look on her face as he continued. Unprepared for wild, unrestrained debauchery? Her eyes continued to widen as he kept going. Or just not interested in getting it on with that particular alpha? Is that like... Katsuki's mouth twisted with mirth and disgust. A literal friend zone? Like, you're a nice alpha and all, but I'd like you better if you stop trying to get in my pants, so let's go to a little room where I can let you down gently instead of destroying your overinflated ego in a public setting. Is that what the parlor's for? She gaped at Katsuki for another moment, then shook her head slowly. I guess so, she admitted after a moment, though I wouldn't necessarily advertise that particular detail. Katsuki snorted in response and followed her when she resumed their walk, presumably still heading for socialization. They passed what looked to be some sort of game room, and from what Bakugou could see, they had some game consoles, flat-screen TVs, a few tables for board games, and a pool table. That game room only for couples too? He asked the girl. She nodded. Basically, anything fun in this place requires you to be accompanied by an alpha, she told Katsuki. I mean, I get it, but I didn't realize when I signed up for this that it would be all alphas all the time, for a whole month. She shook her head in frustration. Even the dining halls, you can only access the cafeteria as a solo Omega if you want any of the good food that's made to order. She tossed a loaded glance over her shoulder at Katsuki. Fuck, this place sure doesn't mess around, Katsuki decided, beginning to feel less confident. He needed a fucking babysitter to do anything besides fulfill his basic necessities. What a load of shit. No, it doesn't, the girl said, then paused before a set of double doors. Anyway, the socialization area is through these doors. Katsuki nodded and took a step forward, but she thrust herself in front of the door, spreading her arms and legs wide in a starfish pose. Wait, she exclaimed. Please don't go in yet. Katsuki could feel his eye twitching. Why not? She appeared to be considering her next words carefully. Don't take offense, but I did come here to find a mate, and you basically look like a Greek sculptor carved you out of pure marble. She gestured at him demonstratively, as if to draw Katsuki's attention to his own physique. So what? I don't see what this has to do with not going in just yet. Katsuki folded his arms over his chest and glowered at her, waiting for a reply. She was giving him an exasperated look in response. If we walk in there together, I'll be setting an impossible standard for any alpha who wants to talk to me. And they won't do it for fear of being rejected because they don't look like you. Katsuki sighed. Remind me why the fuck we're constantly on edge about damaging some alpha's fragile ego. Because I want a fucking mate to go through my heat with me, okay? She snapped, taking a step forward and pushing into his personal space with an audible growl. So stop being an asshole and just wait here for like a damn minute or two, and then you can walk in. Her eyes bored into him as she demanded. Will that work for you? Bakugou grinned wide at her. Fuck yeah. He wished she had talked like a badass from the start. He had a feeling she was actually pretty cool, and apparently she was also dead set on finding an alpha. Bakugou owed her for showing him the route here, so... Yeah, I can live with that, he agreed, then frowned. What's your name? Arakaki Airi. She introduced herself. And you are? Bakugou Katsuki. He introduced himself. Now, go find yourself a nice alpha. I'll be out here gagging at the idea of it, but to each their own. She gave him a confused look. If you're not looking for an alpha, then why are you here? She demanded, more curious than anything. Mandatory residence. Bakugou answered simply. Airi's face clouded slightly. That sucks, she decided, sounding a lot less exasperated than she had moments earlier. Well, see you in there. With that, she pushed through the double doors and Bakugou was alone with his thoughts once more. His phone vibrated again, and Katsuki pulled it out with a quick glance. Fucking Deku had texted him this time. Katsuki considered deleting the text without opening it, but he decided that it probably wouldn't piss him off too much to read the message. He opened it and sighed upon seeing the wall of text. Bakugou was once more tempted to delete the damn thing. Who the fuck sent a massive wall of text to someone and expected them to actually read that shit? Fucking Deku, that's who. Hi, Kachan. I was just wondering if you had plans for rut season. A couple of our old classmates are in town and we're making plans to hang out tonight. Mostly betas and alphas, of course, except for the omegas who already did their rut season week off, so it should probably be a big group. I know you're not big on socializing, but it could be fun. It'll be at a little restaurant just down the street from our agency, the one with really good yakitori and cheap drinks. Anyway, if you want to come, you're welcome to join in, so long as you're not in rut, haha. Katsuki took a moment to compose himself and a reply, then sent off his response. I've got plans already, so I'll pass. Tell the gang, fuck all you assholes for me. Deku was quick to respond, and as cheerful as ever. Will do. Anything in particular that I should be cussing them out for, or is it more of a general statement of poorly worded fondness from everyone's favorite jerk? Katsuki wasn't sure he liked how comfortable Deku was with calling him names now, but he knew if anyone had the right to call him out, it was Deku, so he let the comment go with only a small reaction. Fuck you. Also dealer's choice on the cussing out classmates. Got it. Sorry we'll miss you. Hope you can make it next time. Katsuki was about to return his phone to his pocket when he got a text from Kirishima. Hey bro, did you hear about the dinner tonight? Midoriya said he would text you the info. I'm going, so are most of the other people in our agency. You should come if you can. Katsuki sighed, watching the text roll in. He'd expected this, but Kirishima's quadruple texting was still annoying. Satisfied that his friend was done breaking up his thoughts into multiple messages, he replied, I already have plans, so I won't make it. Kirishima's reply was almost instantaneous. Really? What plans? Can't you reschedule? Seriously, Kirishima was dense enough that he couldn't put two and two together. No doubt Deku had seen plans and assumed that Katsuki had other things to deal with since it was his scheduled rut season. Some people only needed a day or two to take care of business, and normally Katsuki might have considered going, but this time he was locked up in a fucking heat house. So, plans. With a scowl, Katsuki answered Kirishima's dumb question. No, I can't fucking reschedule, it's my rut season. Oh yeah, I guess those kind of plans would be tough to reschedule. Katsuki rolled his eyes, tucking his phone back in his pocket. Kirishima was a bit slow on the uptake, but he figured it out eventually. He turned to look at the double doors and sighed. Well, onto his plans for the evening. He pushed open the double doors and entered the room, glancing around and taking in the atmosphere. There were couches and chairs scattered around the room. A table at one end appeared to be stocked with tea and coffee, and some little shortbreads to go with the drinks. It was a comfortable room, made slightly less comfortable by the overwhelming smell of alpha in the room. It wasn't any one person, but rather the smell of dozens of alphas all vying for attention. There was omega in the air too, but the scent was much milder. After all, the alphas were coming to them, so it wasn't necessary to try too hard to get their attention. Katsuki grimaced and strode across the room, making a beeline for the coffee. He could use the caffeine. He noted several alphas watching him with what could only be described as hackles raised. They were obviously not looking forward to winning over an Omega when he was competing for their attention. People always made assumptions about Bakugou based on his build and temperament. Hell, even most of his co-workers thought he was an alpha. His official paperwork said otherwise, of course, but very few people actually looked at that shit. Bakugou did nothing to correct these assumptions, mostly because he saw the way people treated Omega heroes. Roundface, for instance, was constantly fighting to prove she was tough, and still so many heroes would try and keep her away from the action for her safety. It was fucking stupid. Bakugou had faced her in school and post-graduation enough to know the girl was a force to be reckoned with. But old habits die hard, and there was something about being an Omega that made people assume you needed protecting, even as a pro-hero. Bakugou had no patience for that shit, so he let people think what they wanted, and didn't bother correcting any misconceptions. That would hold true here, in socialization too. He wasn't going to put much effort in, so if visitors assumed he was another alpha and ignored him, that was all the better. He got his coffee, which was surprisingly decent, and glanced around, looking for a seat. He spotted a chair in the corner and moved in that direction, flopping into it after setting his cup down on the coffee table to the right. He stared balefully out at the room, just waiting for this painful day to end. He had to endure a whole week of this. Already he was practicing his deep breathing to try and keep his pissed-off face from making an appearance. He had a feeling that the staff might dock points if he looked too upset. "Hey there," came a voice from his left. It was Katsuki, right? Who the fuck was being so friendly with him just like that? Even Kirishima didn't call him Katsuki to his face, though Katsuki couldn't say he would mind it much if the redhead did transition to a first-name basis. Looking over with a pointed glare, Katsuki found himself staring up at the nondescript alpha from the lobby. "What do you want, boring face?" Katsuki demanded. Blinking in surprise, the young man gestured vaguely. "Oh, I was just talking to some people when I saw you sitting alone over here. I figured you might like some company." Katsuki narrowed his eyes. "I don't. Now fuck off." The young man laughed, a soft sound that somehow sent a shot of nerves through Katsuki's abdomen. "Oh, Katsuki." He sighed, reaching down and laying a hand on his bicep, squeezing gently. "You're funny." Katsuki's skin crawled where the man was touching him and tugged his arm away. "Don't," he said, intending it to sound like a warning, but it came across as pleading. Chuckling again, the man pulled up a chair, sitting down next to Katsuki and settling a hand possessively on his knee as he leaned forward. "Don't be like that," he said, his voice lower than before, a rumbling timbre that made Katsuki's stomach churn uncomfortably. "No one else in this room is giving you so much as a second glance." His hand slid gently up Katsuki's thigh as he leaned in closer to whisper in his ear. "I'm not like the rest of them. I'm more than happy to take you to bed right now." The way he carried himself now was vastly different from his behavior in the lobby. This asshole was on a fucking power trip, thinking that being an alpha somehow made him better or stronger than Katsuki. Without warning, the man leaned in, licking a stripe up the side of Katsuki's neck, nipping gently at the scent gland with a whine. "You'd smell a lot nicer without those suppressants." He purred in Katsuki's ear, and fuck this shit. He didn't care if he got in trouble at this point. He just needed to get away from this fucking alpha. Rising swiftly, Katsuki nearly bowled over Boring Face in his haste to get away. He glanced around the room frantically, even as Boring Face seemed to recover from the shock, stepping up beside him and grabbing Katsuki's ass. "Playing hard to get, are we?" The small, bland-looking man rumbled, a light shining in his utterly uninteresting brown eyes. Katsuki's gaze landed on Sundress Girl. What was her name? Arakaki. He hurried across the room, not caring if it looked like he was running away from the handsy alpha, because fuck it, that's exactly what he was doing. He practically skidded to a stop beside her, trying to fight down the sick feeling in his stomach. "Hey, Arakaki," he greeted weakly, ignoring the furious glare she was sending his direction. Then he noticed the two alphas she'd been conversing with. "Oh. Hey." He introduced himself quickly. "I'm Bakugou." He glanced over his shoulder at Boring Face, who was gliding across the floor towards him with an almost predatory look on his face. He turned back to Sundress Girl, urgently demanding, "What the fuck am I supposed to do if an alpha won't stop touching me?" Unconsciously, he lifted a hand to the side of his neck where Boring Face had put his fucking tongue. She blinked hard, like she wasn't sure how to respond. "Tell him to go away?" she suggested weakly, glancing at the two alphas with her. "Tried that," Katsuki hissed. "No dice." He turned and pointed at the two alphas with her. "Either of you fuckers feel alpha enough to chase away a horny asshole with no sense of propriety or personal boundaries?" He didn't doubt that if Kirishima had been here, he would have already told Boring Face all the many ways he could fuck off, and ensured the matter was totally resolved. But Kirishima wasn't here, so Katsuki was taking matters into his own hands, trying to chase the guy off without looking bad enough to land himself back here again next year. The taller of the two alphas, a distinguished-looking fellow with black hair and glasses, spoke first. "Am I to take it that you're an Omega?" Katsuki sighed. "Yeah, Arakaki here was helping me get comfortable with the routines and shit," he explained before realizing he probably owed her something for this, too. A compliment should do the trick. "She's a good person, is probably an exceptional lover, and all that other wingman shit." He scowled at the alpha. "Now are you going to fucking help or just stand here looking stupid?" It was at this moment that Boring Face arrived, slipping a possessive arm around Katsuki's waist. Stiffening, Bakugou tried to tug away, but the alpha just wound his arm tighter around him. Bakugou lightly shoved the man's shoulder, glancing around to make sure the staff weren't watching. He didn't see anyone, but shit, how was he supposed to get out of this? With another pointed shove, he finally dislodged the clinging alpha, but it didn't seem to dissuade the man long, his eyes flashing as he gave off a sharp scent of frustration and exasperation. Beside him, Arakaki flinched at the harsh smell, and she whimpered a little. This finally spurred the tall, thin alpha with black hair to action. Katsuki mentally decided to call him Distinguished Scarecrow, because he had the glasses, but he was also tall and skinny. "What are you doing?" Distinguished Scarecrow demanded, taking a step forward. "Can't you see this Omega is obviously disinterested?" He scowled. "And you're distressing Airi. Go away." Boring Face looked like he was about to push the issue when Arakaki's second alpha stepped forward. He was compact, with brown hair and broad shoulders. He had a large, wide nose and a squarish face. "Move along," Big Nose told Boring Face. With a sneer, Boring Face finally walked away, and Katsuki let out a sigh of relief he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Oh my god, this place sucks balls," he told Sundress Girl. "How do you deal with this fucking bullshit for a whole month?" He blinked then, turning to the two alphas who'd stepped in. "No offense." "Nah, that guy was an asshole," Arakaki agreed with a soft smile before glancing at her two alphas. "Thank you for helping." Katsuki saw both men stand a little taller, straightening up at the compliment. Huh, that was interesting. A few well-placed compliments could apparently condition alphas to do what you wanted. Katsuki tucked that information to the back of his mind for future consideration. "I owe you one, Arakaki," Katsuki told her, then turned to the two alphas. "You guys too. What are your names?" Distinguished Scarecrow spoke first. "Matsumoto Atsushi." "Yamanaka Kengo," Big Nose said. "Do y'all have a favorite pro hero?" Katsuki asked, figuring he could probably get an autograph from most of the big names with relatively little hassle. Hell, he could probably have them delivered here within the day. The trio exchanged confused glances at the apparent non-sequitur. Arakaki spoke first. "I'm a huge fan of Uravity," she said weakly. "She's so strong and brave." "And gorgeous," added Big Nose, blushing as he realized he'd accidentally said that aloud. She's my favorite too," he said quickly. "I guess Shoto or Deku," Distinguished Scarecrow decided. "I haven't thought about it much. I'm not particularly interested in heroes." "Well, fuck you too," Katsuki thought irritably, already deciding that if Distinguished Scarecrow really didn't care about heroes, he could always just resell the autograph online or some shit. "Got it." Katsuki nodded. You three have fun now, he said, turning to walk away. Wait, Distinguished Scarecrow called after him. Who's your favorite pro hero? Kotsky smirked, glancing back over his shoulder to answer. Definitely Red Riot. With that, he headed back across the room, trying not to think too hard about why he'd said Kirishima's hero name instead of Ground Zero.